Hello, Lisa here. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. If you are interested in reading the tarot, but you don't know what deck to start with, this is definitely the video for you. I'm going to be sharing with you my top 10 recommendations for decks for the absolute tarot beginner. We're going to be getting into it. I'm going to be ranking them from number 10 all the way up to number 1 because ranking is fun. These are definitely being shared with you in a very particular order. I will have links to everything down below. There will be some indie, some mass market. Let's get into it. Coming in at number 10 for my favorite beginner decks is the Witchling Academy Tarot. This is a Llewellyn deck book set. And I have to say, just right out the gate, a Llewellyn deck book set is usually going to be a pretty solid choice for a beginner if you're looking for getting into tarot, is to pick a deck you like the theme of from Llewellyn and jump into that. But this one just has a really fun vibe, and it has some things going for it that I think make it a really great beginner's deck. So it comes in a super cute boxed set that opens up like a book, and you get this little handbook with it that is not overwhelming, but is the most engaging guidebook to read, like cover to cover, because it tells the story of the primary character that is in this deck, this sweet pink-haired girl here. This has total like magical girl vibes if you're into that aesthetic, or like anime. That's not always my thing, but gosh, this is such a cute deck. I really enjoy it. But most importantly, what makes it a good beginner deck is that the deck tells a story. Now, y'all know I'm a fan of a deck that tells a good story. That is obviously a huge theme behind my own tarot deck that is in progress right now, the Unicorn's Journey Tarot, where I'm telling a story with the primary protagonist. And this is a deck that exists out in the world right now that's very affordable, that does that thing where it tells a story. And when you tell a story with tarot, you give brand new beginner readers an opportunity to sort of get to know the tarot in a new way and familiarize themselves with the meanings, right? And this is why I think this makes such a great deck for beginners. You sort of get to know the character, and you get to know what they go through, their trials, their tribulations. And the guidebook entries are not overwhelming. They're not super like weighed down with a lot of esoteric information. This is a really like appropriate deck, I feel like, for like somebody who's maybe teen or young adult who's just getting into tarot, or anybody who is young at heart, or who is drawn to this magical girl aesthetic. It's really helpful to get to know one primary character and see what they learn in each of these cards, see the experiences they have, and be able to put yourself in that. So it's really easy to work with. It's really easy to read, but the scenes themselves do actually mirror the Rider-Waite-Smith classical tarot very closely in a lot of the cards, even sometimes right down to the positioning of the figures. The scenes are different, but if you were to hold this right next to a Rider-Waite-Smith tarot, you would find that in most images, the images do parallel one another, just with different actual scenes and different characters depicted. And that's very, very helpful if you're new to tarot, because getting to know those classical Rider-Waite-Smith images will help you for years in your tarot practice. If this is something that really takes off for you, getting to know those images will absolutely help you in your journey. So having a deck that has a fun aesthetic that you really like, whose guidebook is really easy to digest, easy to read, isn't overwhelming, isn't full of all this esoteric stuff, and just lets you get into a sweet story and get to know the tarot in that way, I think it's just really a great way to get to know the tarot. So this is a wonderful beginner deck, and I'm happy to recommend it to people who are just getting started. Coming in at number 9, this is an indie deck, so it's an independent deck. It will be a little pricier than the more affordable mass market decks that I'm sharing on this list, is the Way of the Panda Tarot by Kimberly San, and especially if you spring for the extra guidebook. This is the bigger guidebook that Kimberly San sells with this deck, not with it, but you know, as an add-on, called the Book of Pandas, which I really want to talk about. So we're going to talk about it. But first off, who doesn't love pandas? Like, they're adorable, they're cuddly, they're sweet. I actually backed this deck on Kickstarter, so this is the Kickstarter edition. Newer editions of this deck, I think, have a pink box, if I remember correctly, or a blue box or something. In any case, it is a beautiful deck. Now, it does come with a little white book with the deck, and this is plenty for getting to know the cards. There's a really sweet panda message for every card, which is just a great little message for the punchline of what that card means. There's also a light and shadow attribute listed. So that's sort of like if you were to read with reversals, you could read that as an upright and reversed meaning, but you could also just work with light and shadow with the card upright. So this is all you need. However, we'll talk about the big book in a minute, because it just is so helpful if you're just getting to know the tarot. So the artwork of this deck itself is so fantastic. The deck was created by Kimberly San, and the artwork was done by Celia Lebel. And it's so sweet. I mean, who doesn't love these pandas, right? Again, this is a very Rider-Waite-Smith based tarot, which is always what I'll recommend to somebody brand new. It's just easier to digest because there are so many decks that follow this particular structure. But getting to know this deck alongside the big Book of Pandas, it's just called the Book of Pandas, but getting to know this next to the Book of Pandas is, I think, going to be a really great experience for somebody new to tarot if you're drawn to this theme, you're drawn to this artwork. I also feel like Kimberly's artwork and decks in general tend to have a pretty strong, like, self-loving and acceptance sort of theme. So if you are doing work around self-worth, if you want to get better about just stepping into power in your life, I feel like this deck really gives you some accessible ways to do that. So it has this lovely theming along with it that I think just works really, really well. So that is the Way of the Panda Tarot, the cards. But let's talk for a moment about the Book of Pandas, because this is such an excellent, excellent book and well worth the extra few dollars to add to your cart if you're buying the Way of the Panda Tarot. When you get into it, you have, first of all, there's a quiz. I think I even wrote in mine. Did I write in mine? No. There's a quiz about how much of a panda are you. This is written in a very, very accessible style, and it is packed full of like journal prompts, of spreads. In fact, every single major arcana card, you get like a good write-up on, and then you also get a spread specifically for that card. So you really have a lot more information here, and you can really get to know each of the cards. When you get into the minor arcana, you still get tons of information, which is so great. Lots and lots and lots of information. So there's just a really great deep dive into this deck in this, but again, it's written in a very friendly way. It's written in a very accessible way. It's not the kind of book that's going to feel intimidating or like you're studying. It's just going to feel like you're befriending a bunch of pandas and like learning about them, basically. Getting to know each one of them as a character. And that I think really makes this so friendly to beginners. And I want to be clear that all of these decks are decks that I use as somebody that I consider myself an advanced tarot reader, and I work with all of these decks and I love them, but I do find them especially friendly for people who are new to tarot who don't want to go in and bite off more than they can chew. So the Book of Pandas for sure, and the Way of the Panda Tarot. And don't forget, I will have all of these decks linked down below so you can check them out yourself. Coming in at number 8, a beloved deck that has been around for ages, and that is the Robin Wood Tarot. And here's another situation where I'm going to recommend a separate, larger guidebook to add on to your experience with this deck if you are a beginner. So the Robin Wood is a classic tarot deck. It came out in, gosh, 1993, my copy. So it's been around for a very long time. It feels a lot like, to me, it feels a lot like the classic Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot, but it has a more, I'm going to say, pagan-friendly sort of vibe to it. And I feel like it just does such an incredible job of showing these Rider-Waite-Smith inspired images, but giving you a little more, like adding a little bit more to the imagery, giving you a little bit to play with. The colors are really lovely. The illustrations are really lovely. And Robin Wood was such a dear member of our tarot community and really influenced my personal path. But if you're looking for a classic looking deck, something that feels a little bit like the original Rider-Waite-Smith, but maybe it's just a little bit easier to read in some ways, at least in my opinion, the Robin Wood Tarot is a no-brainer. I feel like it feels more approachable, it feels less intimidating, and the cards that are intense just feel, let's see if I can find some, they just feel a little bit, okay, here's a good example. Wait, let's see. Let me see if I can find a good example of one that feels just a little bit less. Okay, here. So the Devil card, instead of depicting an actual devil, it shows people that are chained to this chest in the center. And this is great because sometimes we don't understand what the devil means because we're so used to thinking of it as like representing this like figure of darkness or whatever. And that's not what the Devil card is about. This is what the Devil card is about. And here you see it in the illustration. Another example of a more intense card that's just been illustrated in a really effective way is the Death card. We do see a classical Reaper here. We still have a black flag with a white rose, which is a classic symbol. We have a butterfly, which is a wonderful symbol for death and rebirth. But it's a little bit less confronting than a dude on a horse marching over some people. You know, it's just a little bit less like brutal, I guess. And that just, I feel like, makes this a friendlier deck for beginners. I just think it's a really well done deck itself. The art is great. The little white book that comes with the deck is actually pretty decent, but it will mostly just give you keywords for the cards. Let's take a look, though, at this separate guidebook. And as far as I know, this is still in print, but it is sold completely separately. You can usually find it on Amazon. I bought my copy new, but I think there was a point at which I wasn't seeing it in print, and you could find used copies pretty inexpensively, too. Here's the thing. This bigger guidebook gives you so much. So if you really want to learn tarot from the ground up and you want to do it by picking the right deck and book set for you, if you're drawn to this imagery, this deck with this big guidebook does such a wonderful job, especially with the court cards, which can be cards that really, I think, throw a lot of beginner readers off, like in a big way. But this deck, there's some really specific illustration elements that are in every single court card that can help you get to know it better and really kind of clear up confusion. I feel like if you're looking for something very classic feeling, this is such a wonderful choice because this deck combined with this book just, I feel like, are such an easy to work with, easy to learn set. So highly, highly recommend for beginners, the Robin Wood Tarot. Coming in at number 7, another Llewellyn mass market set. One of my absolute favorite Llewellyn sets to recommend for beginners, the Everyday Witch Tarot by Deborah Blake, illustrated by Elizabeth Alba. Oh my gosh, you hear people still talking about this deck to this day because it's so, so well done. And it is one of the most like clear-cut, friendly decks for beginners, in my opinion. It's so accessible, it's so approachable, and it's fun. And it's definitely more than meets the eye. Like, don't underestimate it. It's a powerful, powerful deck. These backs have gotten some serious heat for being just a little bit silly, but the deck itself has a little silliness. I would say that this deck topped my list of favorite decks to read with for years until I finally stumbled into even more in my collection that I tend to reach for more. But this has seen so much use in my collection. The images are very descriptive. I don't know if that's the right word. They're very detailed in a way where they give you a lot to go off of. You can really see emotions happening. It features a lot of like sort of I want to say like sort of silly, stereotypical kind of witches with like striped stockings and pointy hats. And it's got a mix of sort of medieval sort of looking artwork and modern looking artwork. It kind of has this irreverent vibe to it where it brings you into its world and it sort of pokes fun a little bit at itself. It doesn't take itself too seriously. And I think that's one of the things that makes it really, really approachable. And again, when you hit the difficult cards, having a deck that really gives you a lot to go off of, that really shows a lot happening in the scene so you can understand what the card's telling you, that's imperative when you're learning the tarot. And it can help to have themes that are more relatable than, say, the themes that are depicted in the classical Rider-Waite-Smith deck, where, you know, that's from a whole nother time and place. This feels like it brings you a little bit more into the modern era, but still retains some magic and mystery about it and keeps tarot feeling like a fun tool to work with. It doesn't go so serious where it gets intimidating, but it doesn't go so playful where it's no longer usable in a magical or deeply meaningful way. And I really love that about this deck. So the art itself is incredible. I think it's really easy to learn how to read this deck. The meanings are clear and it's just, oh, it's so good. Okay, so that's the Everyday Witch Tarot. It remains a favorite for so many of us who've read with it for a long time for a reason. It holds its spot for a reason. But the guidebook really, I think, brings it home. Deborah Blake is the creator of several sort of witchy books that I feel like are very, very plain speak, accessible, conversational in tone, that are really, really easy to digest. And this is how this deck was made. The guidebook entries are really, really easy to get to know and to remember. There are these like single keyword or single phrase sort of quotes on the bottom of every page that shows a card that sort of kind of summarizes the meaning of that card. So if you just want to be really fast about it, what does the King of Swords mean? It says, look to me for answers from the head, not the heart. So like right away, you know what this card's about. But then you can read in a little further. And it's written, again, in a very accessible way. It doesn't feel overwhelming. There's only a couple paragraphs per card. It's not like it's a really intense, meaty, in-depth guidebook, but it's beautifully created. It holds up really well. And I just think this is an incredible deck. It's definitely stood the test of time for me as a reader who reads, again, at a more intermediate to advanced level, and yet this would still be a deck that I happily recommend to beginners. Next up, another mass market deck that comes in position number 6 is the Lightseers Tarot. This one has done so well for so long for a reason. The Lightseers Tarot is available mass market, it's affordable, and it has just really great artwork. The guidebook is also really incredible for a deck that comes in a set like this without a bigger guidebook. This is really good. I would argue that you get, you know, as much information in this as you would get in the Llewellyn sets, right? It's a couple paragraphs per card. It's a little bit smaller of a form factor and your image is smaller, but you get a similar amount of information because it's quite a little chunky guidebook. So really great meanings here, and you do get a light and shadow style of meaning. So if you do want to work with reversed or upside down cards, you can, and you can read whichever meaning applies depending on whether the card came out upright or reversed. But you can also like learn the more positive or light side of every card as well as the more shadowy side of every card. And that's helpful when you're a beginner learning. And again, I think that Chris-Anne approaches this deck in an accessible way. It doesn't feel like it's talking down to you, and it doesn't feel like it's talking over your head, you know? And I think that really, really helps. As far as the art itself, it's incredibly demonstrative of what every card means, right? You really can feel what's happening for each of these figures when you flip through it. You really know what you're looking at. Okay, this is the personality of the Queen of Wands. You can see it on the card. You really understand, as you get to know this deck and work with it over time, what every single card is trying to tell you, what it means, how it represents itself, what it could mean in a reading. There are a few cards that hit a little bit more, that I think take a little stretch here or there, but if you use the guidebook, you won't be lost at all. Like the Six of Pentacles, you can kind of gather what's happening here, but the guidebook will make it incredibly clear. But the vast majority of cards make it super obvious what it is you're dealing with, what the energy of the card is, what its meaning is. And as soon as you work with a deck like this for a period of time and really get to know it and work with the guidebook, I think that picking up the tarot in general will be a breeze. And this is so accessible. Not only is it a mass market deck and it's already really affordable, it did originally come out as a Kickstarter, but now it's so readily available. And on top of that, Hay House regularly has sales on this deck and all of their decks. So if you want to get it for a bargain, you definitely can. Even less than it normally goes for, you can do that. And I would definitely recommend you buy this directly from either Hay House or from a reputable seller, because there are so many counterfeits of this particular deck, and it's a darn shame because it's so affordable. There's just no reason for it, right? There's no reason for it. It's so easy to get this at such an affordable price and make sure that the artist and creator of this deck, Chris-Anne, gets credit for that sale. I just think it's really important to support the work of our creators. And this one, it's just a shame how much it's been ripped off and copied. And it's something that happens a lot in the tarot community. Just be aware, you know, especially as a beginner, make sure that you're buying from a reputable seller, and make sure that you're not picking up a deck that has like a QR code or is missing a guidebook, because that is a ripoff. And while you might pay less for the deck up front, it's not usually worth it in the end, in my opinion. So that's just me giving my little rant about, you know, please don't buy ripped off decks. But especially for this, it's just so easy to get it affordably that there's just really no reason. So beautiful deck. Definitely recommend for beginners. Love it, love it, love it. Coming in at number 5, this is a deck that I think works for all levels. But it's one of my favorite decks of all time, and I have to mention it here. It is an independent deck. It's called the Tarot of Oneness. Now, this one is going to be probably one of the pricier ones on this list, but it is absolutely astounding. It is so good, and I think the way that it approaches the tarot just makes it really, really, really accessible for somebody new, but also really exciting for somebody who's been reading tarot for a long time, like I have. I feel like it really... it just offers something so fresh and bright and relatable. Oh, it's so good. So let me show you what I mean. So it does come with a guidebook, which we'll talk about in a moment, but the cards themselves, the art on the cards is really unique because it puts you in the first person perspective, which means that the way that these cards are illustrated, this could be like my hand reaching forward, right? This is, I'm being beckoned by the devil in this card. I'm looking up at the star in that card. This is my crown I need to pick up in the embodiment, or the King of Swords. This otter is looking up at me in the Ace of Cups. This wolf is facing me in the Five of Wands. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm the one that's going to go through this labyrinth in the Wheel of Fortune, and I'm the one captaining the ship in the Three of Wands, and so forth and so on. And so it brings you, like, I'm the one in the hammock in the Seven of Cups. Because it does that, it does something to, I think, really make the tarot feel like it's close to you. Like these are situations you could be in, that you maybe have been in. It makes visualizing how the tarot is applying to you a lot easier, I feel. It just does something really unique and really special. And that's something that I haven't seen done ever as effectively, I think, as I've seen it done in this deck. I've seen it done, but gosh darn, like you're the lion in the Emperor card. It's so good. Here's your shadow as you ride this horse in the Action of Wands, which is similar to the Knight, the equivalent card to the Knight. It's just really, really, really good. And this does stray quite a bit from the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith imagery, but it does not stray at all from the meanings of the Rider-Waite-Smith cards. And this will help you to learn the tarot, because I think it will really give you memorable images to work with. And it does that so, so well. And then, of course, you have a similarly chunky little guidebook here that does give you both upright and reversed keywords and a message that I think is really on point. It also does a really great thing, and that is that every card, it has a little color. Let me just zoom you in a little bit more. Every card, it points out each specific symbol that's on the card and what it means and why it's there. That's a really, really great feature to have in a deck. And I think it really helps you as a beginner to understand, like, why is there You know, why is there a koi in the Ace of Pentacles? Why are there cherry blossoms? Why is there a mountain? What does that mean? And it tells you. And I think that is one of the features that makes this such an excellent beginner deck, is it can really teach you the meaning of the card by getting to know the symbols that are in it and why they're there. So wonderful, wonderful, wonderful beginner deck. The Tarot of Oneness. Coming in at number 4 is another favorite deck for me of all time, and it is the This Might Hurt Tarot. Arguably, this is probably my favorite. This is the deck that I have used the most and for the longest in as far as consistently reading for others with it. This Might Hurt Tarot, this is the independent edition. It is coming out mass market by Liminal 11, a smaller publisher. So it is coming out. It will be able to be purchased and acquired affordably. The reason that I find that this makes such an excellent beginner deck is that the cards show the scenes much like you see in the Rider-Waite-Smith, except the scenes are showing modern figures, modern people in modern situations, which helps you to sort of conceptualize what this deck is really trying to say to you, what the card images are showing. Because it shows such a variety of types of people, I feel like it also feels like it's not very alienating. It feels more grounded in reality and the world that we actually live in. It's not that it's perfect, because no deck can ever be perfect on the, in my opinion, on the inclusivity scale, but it does a really good job of showing a wide variety of human beings in a variety of situations that just hits a little bit better, but it's very much following the same exact scene setup as the Rider-Waite-Smith in many of the cards. And because of that, it really is relatable, and it will be the kind of imagery that can stick with you throughout your entire time working with tarot for as long as you work with tarot. I feel like these are the kind of images that are going to remain memorable, that are going to help you to get to know this deck, but more specifically work more easily with other decks you pick up later on. And that is the beauty of working with a Rider-Waite-Smith style deck, one that really follows a lot of the imagery of the Rider-Waite-Smith and contains a lot of the same symbols, is it will help you make that jump from this deck to any other deck. That's one of the things that we're going to be talking about a little later in this video, but it is really important to get to know what each of these cards means according to this system, and then understand how that translates when you work with a different tool, should you choose to work with a different tool down the road. But it's a really wonderful deck. I have not reviewed at this point the mass market version of the deck, so I don't know what differences there are in cardstock and quality and all that stuff, but it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful deck. And it does come with a guidebook that I think is very well written. Again, you can see it's a similar thickness to the other ones I've shown and gives you a similar amount of information. I will say that this one does not specifically call out upright and reversed meanings as a separate thing, which is in alignment with how I read the tarot. But if you are looking for a deck that like specifically gives you upright and reversed, this one does not do that. But I feel like the guidebook is very, very well written, and it covers all of the possible meanings of the cards. It just doesn't parse them out as like if you draw upright or upside down. So I think it's a really excellent little guidebook, and it's memorable. A lot of the quips and the way that the cards are described sticks with you, and that just makes it, I think, an even better tool. So that is This Might Hurt Tarot by Isabella Rotman. Again, probably this is my #1 workhorse deck and has been for a very, very long time. Coming in at number 3 is the Good Karma Tarot. Now this is a mass market affordable deck that I feel like does very similarly what the This Might Hurt Tarot does, but it's affordable, it's mass market, it's really easy to get your hands on, and it's wonderful for beginners. So this is a gorgeous little deck, also much like the This Might Hurt Tarot. The images on the cards are modern, and the people that are depicted are diverse. Let's just pull in the zoom a bit. So again, it feels really relatable. It has a sweet, sort of colorful, cartoonish kind of style that I personally really enjoy. A lot of the characters will have tattoos, which I love. I just think this is really, really fun. It feels like it could show any of like me or any of my friends, you know, on the cards. And I love that. But again, it holds on to the Rider-Waite-Smith meanings very, very closely. And it's really easy to get to know this deck. It doesn't have a whole ton of stuff cluttering up the images. They're very clear. It's very easy to know what card you're looking at, and all of these make excellent qualities for a beginner deck. I also feel like it's held up really well. It's glossy, which a lot of people who I think are newer to tarot really like. They really like a glossy card. The benefit also to glossy cards is that they are a little more resilient. If you know, they're a little bit more resilient to against scratches. They hold up a little bit better if like you get a little something on them, you can wipe them off, you know. So I feel like they're practical in a lot of ways, but I love this deck and I actually use it a lot. It's one of my, it's probably my favorite. It is my favorite. Let me speak strongly. This is my favorite sort of inclusive workhouse mass market deck. It's just a really good all-arounder, and that makes a wonderful choice for a beginner. And the guidebook that comes with this is really fantastic. It speaks very plainly about every single card. It gives you really good advice. And if you're nervous about some of the difficult cards and you want a kind of uplifting message, or you want to look at things a little bit more positively, you have that option because there's a little good karma tip on every card. For example, the Tower, which is arguably probably the most difficult card to pull in a reading, it has a good karma tip that says progress doesn't happen by chance, but by change. And so you have these like memorable little sayings that can help you to really stick with the meaning, but can also help you to not be so frightened by some of the more intense cards, to really get a little bit of that sort of encouraging message, to know how to take the reading in a personal growth direction, to not be disempowered by working with your cards. And I think that's really, really great. I personally think Carrie Ward did an incredible job on this deck, and it's one that I'm very, very happy to regularly recommend people brand new to tarot. Coming in at number 2, and the only reason this did not get number 1 is for a very good reason, which I'll tell you soon when I get to the number 1 deck. But this is effectively really my number 1 for a whole bunch of reasons, but that is the Anna Kay Tarot. Oh my gosh. So this is a mass market deck. That means it's affordable, it's accessible, it's easy to get your hands on it, and it is incredible for beginners. It does such a good job. Now, the art style is not everybody's cup of tea. There's something really about the figures and the way that they're depicted that just sometimes doesn't hit right for people. But if you aren't feeling particularly fussy about how the characters are depicted, or if you like this art style, which I personally really do, this deck, oh my gosh, it is so effective, particularly for getting to know the court cards, for really understanding the major arcana, for knowing what every single card means. This deck is so incredibly effective. The way that the characters are depicted in this deck gives them a lot of emotions on their faces, and that the body language and the emotions in this deck make it so much easier to understand what's happening and what the card has to tell you. That is such an important thing when you're new to tarot, to really understand the feeling or the emotion in a card, what might be going through a character's mind in the card. That's all really important, because that's what will help you really deeply begin to understand the tarot and what the meanings of the tarot are. So this is just such a wonderful, wonderful beginner deck. And again, especially if you really struggle with the court cards, this one is so, so good. It's so good. I cannot say enough positive things about it. It's wonderful. But in addition to the cards themselves just being really, really easy to read and understand, the guidebook feels like it was literally tailor-made for somebody brand new to tarot. It's a nice form factor. It's small. It's got matte paper, so you can write in the margins. You can write notes on the deck, write notes on the pages, not on the deck. You can write notes on the pages. But one of the things that I think is especially wonderful about this guidebook is that you do get all these spots to write notes too. But you get these little tips peppered throughout this book. It's a small, accessible meaning that you can easily understand. But then on a lot of cards, especially cards where they get easily confused with other cards, she'll have a little tip section at the bottom. I think that you'll come away from this with a lot of really useful interpretations that you can definitely take forward with you. And I think that Anna Kay has written the guidebook in a way to keep it very, very accessible to people new to tarot, to make it easy to understand, to wrap your head around, and that just makes it incredible for somebody brand new to tarot. So that is the Anna Kay Tarot at my number 2 spot. Now the number 1 spot has to go, for reasons I will explain, to the original Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot. Oh, look at my bag matches my reading table. It's like, where's the deck? Who knows? It's blended in. It's a chameleon. But this is the classic. Now, the copy I have of the Rider-Waite-Smith that I personally like for study, for learning, for referencing is this one. And this is the original Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot that was illustrated by Pamela Coleman Smith and was sort of written and designed by Arthur Edward Waite. It was his like sort of initial brainchild, but Pamela Coleman Smith brought a lot to the table. Don't get me wrong. So the two of them created this deck. This is what all the other decks base their images on, really. When you're talking about any deck based on the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot system, it's going to be based on this. This is the classic. This is the tarot deck that we often think about when we think of tarot. The reason that this has to come in number 1 for beginners is because once you get familiar with these images, everything else gets kind of added to that as additional layers of learning. I did not learn on this deck originally, and so in a way, my learning process took a different path. But that doesn't mean that I don't recommend this number 1. If you're not completely like bored silly by the images, if this is a deck you are willing to look at, get to know, and study, it really is the best jumping off point, because so many other decks are built upon this structure. And once you have these images sort of ingrained in your mind, they remain there and you can reference them internally, even if you don't work with this deck. I'll be honest, I've only read with this deck, or any version of this classic deck, a handful of times. I always reach for other decks, but I got to know this one really well. And I learned about it. And learning about this deck is what helped me to understand all the other decks. And so while it's not my favorite to recommend from a pleasure standpoint or from making learning feel accessible and enjoyable, it is really worth studying. And if you're the type of person that really wants to go all in with studying tarot, that really wants to get into sort of the intellectual side of it, really wants to build a strong, sturdy foundation, especially if you like these images, because honestly, that's all it was for me in the beginning, is I didn't really like the images. I knew I wouldn't reach for the deck. I really genuinely appreciate these images now, but when I was brand new to tarot, I found them really boring and inaccessible. And if that's you, this is not going to be your best pick for your very first deck. But if you don't mind the images, if you're not turned off by them or they don't put you off in some way, then this is the best starting place for sure. But if you're going to pick up a classic Rider-Waite-Smith, and again, this one is actually I say again, but I never said. This one is the one called The Original Tarot. It's by DeBry. I will have it linked down below. The reason I like this one the best is because the images are so clear. They kind of remastered it in a way. They kind of cleaned up some of the line work. And at least that's my understanding. I could be wrong, but I feel like the line work is really, really good in this deck. I feel like it's really crisply illustrated, and it's on a beautiful cardstock that's really easy to shuffle. But I feel like I see details in this version that I haven't seen in other classic versions. It doesn't feel garish to me, but it also doesn't feel kind of muted and toned down like the Centennial and other versions. But there are a lot of different versions of the original that you can get. Pick one that you like. If you like these images, pick your favorite version of this exact deck. Pick your favorite version. Some are colored and more soft, like colored pencil style. Some are more muted and look more vintage looking. But grab one that you like, and then pick up my favorite absolute resource guide for tarot. But it's a little intense. The 78 Degrees of Wisdom by Rachel Pollack. Now, this is an older edition. There's a newer edition out now. But this is such an incredible resource for learning, for that foundational learning of the tarot. I will say that of all the other sets and books and things that I've talked about in this video, this one to me was harder to digest than the others. But my time with this book is invaluable and I learned so much, and it is really, really an incredible resource. Rachel Pollack just gives you so much, and there's so many juicy tidbits and things that you can really lean into. This is a book that I referenced heavily when I created a beginner tarot series here on the channel called Tarot Memoirs, which I will try to remember to link that playlist. It's some old content from me, but I really took every single card in the tarot and kind of personalized it. But this was a heavy resource for me during that series. But more importantly, it's so good. Rachel Pollack is an incredible mind from our tarot world, and she has so much to share, so much wisdom to share. You will not come away lacking from working with this book. My opinion is that it seems, to me, this would have been very intimidating if I started here. So it can be hard. But there are some of you out there who are not going to be bothered by that at all, who are going to be like, yes, I want to go in deep and I want to start from that deep foundational place. And so these will be my number one top recommendation for you, if that's you. For me, I wanted a deck that I would be excited to reach for, that would feel approachable and not too intimidating. That's where I needed to start. And my recommendation for beginners is always meet yourself where you are, right? If you know you're going to be intimidated by something that's like chunky and like intense, and by a deck that doesn't excite you imagery-wise, if that's the case, and this deck doesn't excite you imagery-wise, and this book feels like it's going to be intimidating, then this isn't the right choice for you. But of all the decks that I showed in this video, I hope there was at least one that you can be like, yeah, that's a deck I'd like to learn on. And then you can build and build and build from there. You can add layer upon layer onto what you're doing after that. But these remain among my favorites for people that are brand new to tarot. And I do get that question a lot from people who are like, what deck do you recommend I start with? And these are all decks that I have heartily and frequently mentioned to others in the past, with the exception of, I think, the Tarot of Oneness, because it's the newest in my collection. I've certainly been talking it up a lot, but most of these are tried and true favorites that I've recommended time and time again. And I just think they're excellent jumping off points for people who are new to tarot. If you are a tarot beginner, please don't be scared. Please don't be intimidated. It's a really great system. And once you learn the sort of structure of it, the nuts and bolts of it, everything else after that is gravy. Everything else after that just kind of adds to it. And if you really want to get started learning tarot, I have some excellent resources for you that I'm going to link in the description box down below, and I'm going to link up in the cards. The first of these is I created a full, absolutely free tarot course to help you get your feet under you when it comes to learning an essential basic meaning of every single tarot card in the deck. There are no hooks. There are no, like, I'm not going to leave you hanging. I give you the entire thing. It's on YouTube. It's called Tarot with Training Wheels. I will have that playlist linked up in the cards so that you can check that out. If you want a little bit more than that, if you want to go a little deeper than just an essential basic meaning for every card, if you want to add more to that, I also have a course on my website called Tarot Bootcamp for Beginners. And if you've done all this foundational stuff, but you're watching this video just for funsies, and you're a more intermediate reader, or you've already gotten past the beginner level and you want to know more about kind of going off book with reading, like reading intuitively, really getting into more of a psychic space with your readings, I do have a course called Intuitive Tarot. I will have that Intuitive Tarot reading course also linked up in the cards and in the description box, so you can check that out. That is definitely for those of you who want to learn how to get into that more like loosey flowy state with tarot and really get kind of past the structure of the essential meanings and go somewhere else with it. So I will have that linked for you as well. That is it for me for today, you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. Many, many blessings. Thank you for all of your support here of the channel and for hanging out with me. If you liked what you saw here, please do subscribe, and don't forget to click the buttons, comments down below, do all the things. Thank you all so, so much, and may your magic always shine from the inside out. Bye.